Hello and welcome to the Inspired Life Summit. This is the place to discover how to be, feel, and live an inspired life. I'm Krysti Turznik, motivational speaker, best-selling author, and life coach, helping people to connect more deeply with their inner self so they can create a life that speaks to their soul with meaning and value. The Inspired Life Summit is designed to take your life to the next level as leading experts and influencers share their best secrets on how to create an inspired life. Today, Drew Stevens is with me. Drew is an international keynote speaker and author of 14 books and over 50 audios. He has been chosen as one of the top international business bloggers around the world, as well as starting two nationally accredited programs in sales leadership. Drew works with individuals that struggle and transforms them into thriving professionals. His programs are internationally acclaimed, and he is frequently requested by the guests. Welcome, Drew.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me here this morning.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for our conversation today. So today our topic is speeding through darkness and accelerating growth during times of stagnation and trouble. So, Drew, why do we always seem to get into a cycle of negative self-talk?
Great question. And I think what happens, Krysti, is that we start hearing voices in our head. Part of my story, and without going into grave detail, but two very large stories I can let you know about is, number one is I was an abused child. So as an abused child, we self-direct a lot of that negativity and thinking, my parents love me, so it must be me that's doing something bad. And so what winds up happening is I'm the bad one, I'm not doing good, and then there's that feeling of helplessness and loneliness. The second issue is that I was terminated 3 times in a 6-month period, the latter being on Christmas Eve. And, you know, at that point, you start looking at yourself and saying, I must have done something wrong. I must have guided where I am today. And to a certain extent, whether you're working or whether an abused child, you know, it's not, you know, only everybody else's fault. There must have been something there. But the fact is that it's very easy for us to get in our heads and start directing a lot of the negativity towards us. And what we tend to do is we tend to insulate ourselves with that negative talk. And then what happens is we shut off the world around us, and that negative talk then manifests, creating certain psychological issues at that point. What I mean by that, anxiety, fear, depression, and the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes we can be our own worst enemy at that point, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And have you discovered that there are certain methods to help someone change their focus when they're in these situations of trouble?
Absolutely. What I typically say to everybody is, look, when you are in the negative situation and you're feeling anxious and the fear is starting to hit you, first and foremost, when we look at fear, there is an acronym that's frequently used. I don't want to make it sound trite because I'm sure some of the viewers have heard this before, and it's false experiences appearing real. But that's true, because what happens is under negative circumstances, those negative feelings will have us starting to look at all of the negativity and nothing positive. So let me use the 2 examples I brought up. Either if it's abuse, and some of your viewers know somebody that is in an issue of domestic violence, or if they previously lost a position and now they're looking for a job. In both situations, it's very easy to say, I'll never get a man again. I'll never find somebody else that will love me. No one in this world is ever going to love me again. Or I had a great $150,000 a year job. I'm never going to get that job back. I was the number 1 in sales. I'll never be number 1 in sales again. I'll never be the CEO again. Who's going to hire me? I'm 55. Evans, you know, nobody. Those are those false experiences. So what I always say to people is, look, what you have to do is you have to do 3 very important things to get out of this. Number 1, you have got to arm yourself with a great group of people that will influence your way to more positive thinking. Part of this is yourself, but you really need a group of people that are going to support you. Number two is that you have to get up every single day and look at this as, what is the challenge that you're undergoing and what's great about this challenge? What are you learning and what are you going to take with you? I always look at this as learning lessons. There's that attitude in the military where failure is not an option. My attitude is we fail every single day of our lives. In some way, shape, or form, we make a mistake. And so what? Just move on. And the last thing is that there's no such thing as perfection when you're 80% ready to go. So don't worry about the wonderful resume you think you're going to have. Don't worry about the mate that looks great or cooks great or, hugs you a certain way, because there is no such thing as perfection. When your ticket goes, that's perfection. Other than that, we're all just sitting here going through life every single day. And if I look at this through a biblical component for a moment, in no way, shape, or form, in biblical terms, did Moses, Abraham, Jesus undergo perfect conditions. It just didn't happen. So what we as humans have to understand is that we have to go through life expecting some difficulties and going through those hurdles, learning from them, and just trying to do our best to keep these negative situations to the side, learn from them, and move forward.
Oh, I love that. And you had so many great tips in there. One of the things that you had talked about were the people that we surround ourselves with. So how do the people that are in our environment, how do they impact our ability to either stay in this situation where we are, or how do they help us to move beyond that?
I think what happens is most people, it goes back to the whole notion. I think most people truly believe that if I say stagnant, it's safe. I'm in a safe environment because I know what happens in this environment. So if I move, I'm undergoing change. And what I find and have found over the years, Krysti, is that all of us really don't like change. I heard it said, I was watching a broadcast many months ago, and it's probably the first time I've ever heard it. So I'll repeat it here, and that is, there's no one, the speaker who I was listening to said, there's only one person in this world that really enjoys change, and that's a baby with a wet diaper.
Love that. Love that.
All of us hate going through change. You and I can go on the interstate, head to a particular job. We know it's going to take 30 minutes to get to the client for that position, and suddenly we get on, we're traveling 2 miles, the interstate shut down, major accident. Immediately we get annoyed. We want to watch our favorite broadcast, and now suddenly we can't watch it. There's a special on, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's a State of the Union address, and we're sitting there going, I wanted to watch that. And suddenly, once again, it's change. A process changes at work. Something happens within the neighborhood, whatever the case may be. What I find is that when we look at these life-empowering situations, and when I'm working with individuals as a high-performance coach, I got to get them out of that environment that they're in. I've got to make them a little bit more uncomfortable, because that's where that edginess is going to create those opportunities for success. And the more I can help them with the fear of not changing, or of changing, so that they're not in that degree of stagnation, the better off they're going to be. So, life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So we just do little things every single day to help with those attitudes of change.
I love that. And really, like what I heard from that is we have to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because things aren't always going to be the way that we want them to be.
And, just to follow that up, Krysti, there's something that I had heard many years ago from a mentor I had worked with. And I'll just extrapolate because for different conversations, say, we have to feel comfortable in our own skin. And I think some of us lack some degree of confidence. And even though you look at leaders today and say, wow, he or she, unbelievable leader, believe it or not, they too fear change. They too have issues with fear. And what I have found is that to a certain extent, if we need to go through change, we need to be slightly heretical in doing so. And in that, we need to feel confident in our heart and soul so that we can undergo our change. So you have to feel good about yourself in order to make that change happen. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I love that. So we talked a bit about how our negative self-talk gets, you know, we get in our own way with that. How else have you found that people really block themselves when things are going wrong?
You know, what I often find is the nucleus of the problem is that they're hanging around the wrong people. One of the best books that any performance coach is ever going to tell you to read, and sometimes even in leadership, is Think and Grow Rich. And Napoleon Hill talked about the degree of the mastermind or use of the mastermind many years ago. And it's very interesting because, you know, you can look back on biblical times such as Jesus and the band of misfits that he was with, but there are people that helped him think better, act better to a certain degree, and he helped them, excuse me. Lincoln, who is one of my favorite leaders, surrounded himself with a great group of people that helped him get rid of slavery and eventually win the Civil War. The fact is that many of us, in fact, to a certain extent, I can even say all of us, will tend to arm ourselves with individuals that really don't support us very, very well. And believe it or not, many of the viewers will find this as a heretical statement, but if family members are dragging you down, you got to get rid of them. If you have friends that are not letting you think in a positive way, you've got to get rid of them. And because those people will have that degree of negative influence and bring you in the dark in your lives. There are family members that will say, well, you lost the job maybe because you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right. You know, I came from an abusive family, so I didn't have people that really supported me. And just as an example, I was a track and field athlete. My parents never showed up at a track event, ever. I won an award as most valuable player. They were never there. Unfortunately, because of that and because of the physical abuse I went under, I cut them off. Now, people will find that as a very large-scale thing to do, and they wouldn't cut off a parent, but that's what I mean. How many relationships are some of your viewers in, or some of your viewers know somebody that is in a difficult relationship, and they're unwilling to cut it off? You can watch television, you can see women that are in domestic violence and keep thinking, well, it's something I'm doing wrong, so I'll just stay with the husband or boyfriend that I'm with. Or I'm going to stay with the boss that I'm with, even though he talks to me negatively, even though he's abusive, so on and so forth. No, life is short. Life is very short. And there's no reason why you need to be castigated by somebody that is unwilling to support you. So my attitude is to surround yourself with a good group of people. It takes a little bit of time, but there are people out there that will support you, will love you, and will help you build your confidence back up and point you into a new direction.
Yeah, such good advice. Do you have thoughts on if there is a person who is a bit more negative than the majority of the people that you're surrounding yourself with? How do you put yourself in that position where you're not allowing them to impact you and your dreams?
You know, one of the things that I say to people is simply this: they're my dreams. Those are my dreams that, you know what, God put them in my heart. And I'm not going to go against what God put in my heart. That's what lives in me. And your question is a very good one, because how many people think throughout the day, you know what, I want to own my own business, or I want to marry somebody rich, or I want to have children, this is the type of job that I want. Who's to say that you can't have any of those things? And by walking around each day with friends that bring you down, relatives that bring you down, all they're doing is putting the kibosh on your dreams. And so what I tell people constantly is you've got to avoid that, because if God put them in your heart, they're there for a reason. And you should strive towards that. Now, you're going to have to take your time. You're going to have to realize that dreams are nothing more than opportunities to start taking advantage of situations. So if, you know, that's not to say that you couldn't start a business if you're 12 or 14. That's not to say that you're not going to meet a millionaire and perhaps fall in love at some point, but you also have to do a little bit of work and place yourself into positions to do just that. In addition to that, I'm reminded of something else, and that is what I always say to people is if that positive nature is in your heart and you have these dreams, you have those goals, you have to do three things. Number one, start looking at people that could point you in that direction, because goes back to the 6 degrees of separation. Someone knows someone who knows somebody else. So you really know, I guess, in short answer, you really have to know who your network is and who you can network with. Number two, start reading about things to get you to where you want to be. There's so many things that are out there. It's hard for me to indicate to people where to go in certain aspects. But what I would tell people is to become more learned in what you're looking for, whether it's love or money or positions, whatever it is. And third, stay away from social media. There are too many thoughts. There are too many individuals on social media very willing to bring you down. Social media is not the answer. And so, therefore, what I would suggest to individuals is that if you're really looking to make some changes and looking for more opportunities, don't use social media for that networking and appetite for reading information. Look for people that truly are going to support you, and look for it in more traditional forms.
Yeah, yeah, so good. Have you found, or do you have any thoughts on if someone is experiencing a situation where they feel like no one is listening to them, or they just don't know where they can turn, like how do they get support? Where do they go?
What I've done for support in the past, it's a really good question. Let me start with the most obvious, and that is, if you're looking for support, you're really feeling down, and you're really not feeling good about yourself, then a coach in some way, shape, or form, a coach or a mentor, there's tons of them out there. You mentioned in your biography, as I did, I work with individuals and I mentor them and I coach them to higher levels of success. So look up through the internet and find out, or ask some of your friends who might be able to coach you in that particular area that you're looking for. Secondly, if you're really feeling depressed, and what I tell people all the time is, I'm not a psychologist. I'm an accountability coach. But if there are issues of depression and sadness, and not where I'm thinking that somebody would do something negative, but just not feeling themselves, then I would seek professional help if necessary, a therapist or somebody that you can have that intimate conversation with. The third is that I am a firm believer, and part of me is because there's some spirituality in the way that I coach and mentor. I believe that God doesn't want anyone to feel negative about themselves. God provides glory. God provides milk and honey. He provides honor, and he provides a ton of grace. Look at it because it's through all areas of Scripture. So, and what I will say to any viewer that's here, you don't have to be religious in order to read Scripture. I think that's the biggest misnomer about being somewhat spiritual. Jesus was not born into the world from God to develop a religion. It was God's desire to have a relationship with human beings. So therefore, go and have a relationship through lines of Scripture. Understand two things. Number one, God never said that there weren't going to be trials and tribulations. Certainly, Jesus Christ had trials and tribulations. Moses did, Jonah did, Abraham did, David did, and the list goes on. What I would tell all of the readers, though, is just pick an area, start reading, and look deeply into what God has to say about you, and realize that you are his creation, and you are meant to live in victory and in glory. And all of this is going to pass. You just have to change that mindset to a more positive role, and you will see unbelievable changes in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so often the trials and tribulations help you to grow into the best person that you are meant to be.
Absolutely. You have a book just behind you that I'm looking at as I'm talking, called Courage. And what I would tell any listener sitting here and listening to this is just have the courage to make change. And typically, as we talk about this negative self-talk, these dark cycles, the inability to move forward, sometimes all it takes is just a little bit of courage to make a slight alteration, and you will be shocked as to what it does to your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you had shared a little bit about your personal story. Speak a little bit, if you would, please, about your books. Like, what motivated you to write all of those books?
It's a really good question. I guess there's three things in this. Number one is that I had gotten an MBA, and then eventually, just because I was on the platform, I shook the hand of the dean, who happened to have been the doctor. And as he shook my hand, I was like, wow, it would be really cool to get a doctorate. So I went on and received a doctorate from there. I just never wanted to say should have, would have, could have. But what was happening, Krysti, is I had altered from a full-time position, which is when I got terminated, to becoming an international speaker and business coach. And then this, people were introducing me, and I just, people would ask me all the time, so what do you do for a living? I'm a speaker. Oh, that's nice. Nice. And so what wound up happening is that somebody said to me, you should take some of your thoughts and put them down on paper. And I started writing articles. I had almost, 1,500 articles, and I looked and amalgamated them and developed a book from that. And as soon as I had a book, people went, oh my God, you wrote a book? Yeah, okay. And suddenly people started to genuflect that didn't genuflect before. So I enjoyed the process of writing a book so much, I wrote another one, and then another one. And then as technology changed, between workstations and laptops and all of that, I was able to write literally wherever and whenever. And one led to 14 before it was all said and done. So I just enjoy looking at it and getting my thoughts out there. I'm in the process of writing 2 right now.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love that. Definitely. Are all of your books then available on your website?
They are. They're on the website. They're on Amazon and several other places as well. Okay, and some are self-published.
Oh, fabulous. So do you have a favorite book that has inspired you and in your own personal life?
Absolutely. My favorite book of all time, I read it every single year, is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It is literally the book that changed my life. And the reason being is because part of it has, it was easy for some of the conversation we're having here to say the Bible, but it was the first kind of secular book that I could read that taught me how to treat others well. And it's what really led me into the world that I'm into today. I went into a sales and marketing role, and I absolutely fell in love with it, and that transformed me into a coach from there. But, the fact of needing to understand that the person's name that they'll ever hear is the sweetest sound that they will ever hear. That smiling, just that notion of smiling, it's the sweetest thing that you'll ever see, as well as the other 25 other things that are in the book. I just still find it a remarkable book even today.
Yeah, definitely one of the classics. Yeah, absolutely. So if you could give people one last piece of advice, what would that be?
Realize that, very similar to what I said before, and I want to give them an action step as well. Life has its trials and tribulations. There is no one that goes through a perfect life. And the sooner you latch on to that, the better off you're going to feel. Because I think too many people feel that life has this idealistic way about it, and that some people just go through life and don't have any volatility at all. Everyone has volatility, which, I'll do it this way, Krysti, which then reminds me is that if you're going to realize that there's going to be some volatility or at least some bumps in the road, then stop comparing yourself to others. Stop comparing yourselves to Krysti. Stop comparing yourselves to myself. Stop comparing yourself to the President of the United States or any celebrity out there. And I'll tell you what, for where we are in 2018, don't compare yourself to Oprah, because Oprah has her troubles too. You just don't see them. You don't know what goes on behind the camera, behind the closed doors. Live your life, and live your life by yourself. What I will do in ending the question is also say to you one of 2 things. Either one, journal at the end of the day, and journal about the great things that occurred to you that day. What are you thankful for? What are you happy about? What is the thing that just made you smile throughout the day? Some people, Krysti, will go to bed, oh, it was a miserable day. They sound like you are. Oh, God, my boss this, and oh, God, the weather was that. No, why not just take all of that before you hit the pillow and say, one thing happened to me today. I got a wonderful email, or I received a terrific telephone call, or I was on the line at the coffee shop and somebody brought me a cup of coffee. That then encourages you to wake up the next day and literally bounce out of bed. And then start the day with fresh thoughts for the day. don't listen to the news. Don't listen to the fake news. Don't listen to the media. Just think about what you're going to do to make it a positive day for yourself.
Oh, I love that. That is really such great advice. You've given our viewers so much good information today. Thank you for sharing all of that.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. So how can people connect with you?
Couple of different ways. One, you can call me. I have a toll-free number, which is 877-391-6821. Or go to my website, which is Drew-Stevens, and Stevens with a B.com. And if you want to just simply email me, it's drew@drew-stevens.com.
Oh, perfect. And all of the links are available on our Inspired Life Summit webpage, along with the free gift that you are offering. So it's so true that understanding how to accelerate this growth that you know is within you is always available to you during those times of stagnation and difficulty. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. So this is Krysti Turznik reminding you to live every day like it's a day at the beach. Take care.